You don't really notice the hairline crack in the wall until one day, the whole damn thing caves in. Love's like that. Sometimes, what breaks you doesn't come out of nowhere, it was always there, you just weren't ready to see it. You spend 10 years with someone, you think you know their rhythm. You learn the cadence of their laugh, the way they twist their hair when they're lying, or how they say your name differently when they're about to ask for something. It's all coded in you like a second language. Her name was Julia. We met in college, sophomore year, same psych class. She sat behind me and used to tap her pen when she got bored. We both liked black coffee, late-night movies, and hated cilantro with a passion. One of those click fast, stay long kind of love stories. Moved in together after graduation, got a fixer-upper in a quiet neighborhood with a porch just wide enough for 2 chairs and a morning paper. We built a life. Not flashy, not perfect, but ours. I thought I had the whole script. But the truth? I didn't even know which play I was in. It all started with a forgotten password. Julia had gone to visit her sister out in Colorado, 5-day trip, nothing unusual. We'd both gotten good at giving each other space over the years. Trust was never a problem. Or so I thought. She texted me on the second day. "Can you send me that document I was working on? It's in my email drafts. You know the one." It wasn't unusual. She used her drafts folder like a notepad. Grocery lists, half-finished work emails, travel plans. I knew her password, she'd given it to me when we filed taxes together last year. That kind of trust. That kind of relationship. So, I logged in. And there it was. The draft she meant, notes for a nonprofit grant she was applying to. But 2 lines below it, was something else. No subject line. Just a blank draft with the first few lines of a message. And the salutation? "Dearest Matthew." I sat there staring at it. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe it was the word dearest. Nobody writes like that anymore. It sounded intimate. Old-fashioned. Like something you write when you mean it. I clicked. At first, it didn't make sense. It read like a letter you'd find in the attic. Confessional. Heavy. She wrote about how the timing never felt right, and how she'd always imagined a different version of her life. How this thing between her and Matthew was complicated, but it felt real in a way she couldn't explain. She signed it. "Always yours, even when I shouldn't be, L." I reread it. Then again. It was like watching a movie where you realize halfway through that the narrator's been lying the whole time. Matthew? Who the hell was Matthew? I wanted to believe it was old. Maybe something she never sent. Maybe a fantasy. We all have our ghosts. Maybe this was one of hers. Maybe it didn't mean anything. But curiosity is a drug. So I started looking. There were no sent emails to Matthew. No inbox messages. Just the draft. But when I checked the search bar and typed his name, I found folders. Hidden, unnamed folders buried in the depths of her Google Drive. Inside them were documents, letters, poems, playlists, even scanned ticket stubs. 10 years with me. And a decade's worth of fragments written to someone else. She hadn't just been keeping a secret. She'd built a second life in the quiet. In emails never sent. In names never spoken. In words she never dared read aloud in our house. I didn't touch her stuff. I didn't scream or call or text. I just sat in the dim light of our office and tried to match the woman in those words with the woman who kissed me goodbye every morning. It didn't add up. So I started digging. Not to punish her. But to understand who I'd been sleeping next to for 10 years. And what I found next made the draft feel like the prologue. The funny thing is, we shared passwords. Netflix. Spotify. Hulu. Even the thermostat app. That's how open our life was, or how open I thought it was. But her Google Drive? That was her world. And Matthew lived in it. After I found that first draft, I sat there in the low glow of the desk lamp, trying to piece it together. 10 years with Julia, and I'd never once heard her mention a Matthew. No framed photos, no holiday cards, no offhand stories about someone from college or childhood. Nothing. So how could this man, this name, be such a fixture in the most private corners of her life? I opened one of the folders. No label. Just a string of numbers as a title, probably to keep it from being noticed. Inside, dozens of documents. One called October Rain. Another called Train Station, 2016. Each one dated. Each one written like a journal entry. But every single one began the same way. For Matthew. Some were poems. Some read like diary entries. Others were just lines of thought, unfinished but vivid. Things like, when he brushed my hand that night, I thought lightning had entered the room. You asked me what would have happened if we'd never walked away. I think about that every day. He'll never see this. But if he did, I think he'd know I meant it. I clicked through another document, a long letter, no punctuation, like she'd written it in a rush. I love you, I've loved you since before I knew how to say it. I built a life but I never let go of you. Not really, I thought I could bury it, but it's louder now, and sometimes when he says my name it sounds like yours. That last line. That one stuck with me. Because that was me. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't even know what I could do. We weren't fighting. We weren't broken. At least, I didn't think we were. Sure, we had our quiet seasons. The long silences over breakfast. The occasional sigh that said, "This again," when the trash hadn't been taken out. But nothing earth-shattering. We'd talked about buying a new place just last month. She was even looking at paint swatches. But now I didn't know if the woman in those poems had ever really been painting this life with me, or just passing time until she could write about someone else again. Still, I needed answers. So I kept digging. I searched her contacts. Nothing. No Matthew in her call log. No texts. Nothing obvious. Then I opened her photo backup folder. That's when I found it. A single photo. Tucked in a folder labeled Bold Work Docs. It was from 2014. Julia. Sitting on a bench. Autumn leaves behind her, hair down, smiling, not the smile she gave when someone said cheese, but the kind of smile you give when someone's holding the camera and you want to be seen. And next to her, a man. Scruffy beard, dark-rimmed glasses, hand resting on her knee like it belonged there. I didn't know his face. And that terrified me. Because if there's anything worse than finding out your partner's been hiding something, it's realizing they've succeeded at it. For years. I looked at the photo's metadata. October 19, 2014. She told me she'd gone to a conference in Boston that weekend. I remember that trip. I made her a playlist for the train ride. Bought her favorite granola bars for the suitcase. She came home tired but grateful. Said the speakers were boring but the city was nice. She never said a thing about Matthew. Never mentioned sitting on a bench with him. Never mentioned taking a photo like that. Never said she had a whole folder of unsent letters waiting to spill over. I printed the photo. Set it on the kitchen table. And just stared. I knew I had two choices. Pretend I never saw it, go back to the way things were, let the lie continue. Or pull the thread. And see how much of my life unraveled with it. If you think betrayal is a blade, you're wrong. It's a thread. You pull it thinking it'll be small, simple, containable. But it keeps coming, longer, darker, and older than you ever imagined. I kept the photo on the kitchen table for 2 days. Sat beside it during coffee, passed it during breakfast, stared at it when the house went quiet. She looked happy in that photo. Not the kind of happy we posted on Instagram, those staged smiles at wineries or pumpkin patches, but the kind of happy that glowed from the inside. A relaxed, unscripted version of her. And the man, Matthew, he didn't look unfamiliar in the way strangers do. He looked belonging. Like he'd been in her story longer than I knew. Maybe from before me. Maybe not. But I needed to know. So I started pulling the thread. It began with the photo's location data, Harvard Square, Cambridge, Massachusetts. A quiet little corner with old benches and overpriced coffee shops. A place she never mentioned. She'd said that conference had been at a Marriott near the airport. Now I wondered if that was even real. I dug deeper. Into bank records. She'd used our shared card that weekend for a bookstore, a cafe, and a boutique hotel, not the one she told me about. I called the hotel. Asked for a copy of the receipt. Said I was auditing charges for a business trip. They emailed it. 2 guests, 1 king bed. Check-in, October 17th, check-out, October 20th. Julia and a second name, Matthew Carr. I'll admit, my hands shook. I sat there with the receipt in one hand and the photo in the other. 10 years of trust had just cracked straight down the middle. That weekend she came home, she told me she was exhausted from keynote speakers and panel discussions. I remember rubbing her feet while we watched The Office, and she laughed at one of my stupid impressions. She even brought me a souvenir, an old Harvard sweatshirt she said she grabbed at the train station. Now I realized, that wasn't a souvenir. That was camouflage. And here's the thing, they say if you go looking for trouble, you'll find it. I went looking for the truth. And it found me. Late that night, I opened her laptop again. I know how that sounds. I'm not proud of it. But once you find the crack, you can't not press your fingers against it. I checked her notes app. She always used it for journaling. Password protected, but I knew the passcode. Inside, dozens of entries. Short. Date stamped. Raw. Here's one from December 2017. I saw Matthew again today. 3 years, and he still looks at me like I matter. I hate myself for wanting that. I hate that I don't feel that at home anymore. I hate that I'm writing this. And another, from June 2019. He asked me what I was still doing with Adam. I couldn't answer. Not honestly. He said he'd wait, but not forever. I wish I didn't believe him. That one made me stand up from the chair and pace the room like the truth had claws. She wasn't just emotionally cheating. She was considering leaving. I sat back down, heart racing, wondering how I'd missed it all. But here's the worst part, it wasn't that she stopped loving me, it's that she never fully did. Not the way I did her. I spent years building something I thought we were building together. Turns out, she was carving an escape hatch the whole time. I closed the laptop. And in the quiet that followed, a voice in my head asked the question I didn't want to answer. If she hadn't been caught, would she have ever stopped? The truth was already out now. At least, for me. But she didn't know I knew. Not yet. And that meant I had a choice. Confront her with everything, burn it all down in one night. Or wait. Not out of revenge. But because I wanted to see what version of her came home to me each day, now that I'd seen the version she wrote about in secret. Sometimes, when you live with a stranger, you don't realize it until you stop looking at the familiar. The moment you realize someone's been living a whole other life beside you, it's not like thunder. It's not loud. It's quiet. A kind of silence that makes you question every sound that came before it. Julia came home on a Thursday. She walked through our front door like nothing had changed. Same smile, same overnight bag slung over one shoulder, Same little sigh she always let out when she stepped back into our space, like the world was too heavy out there and I was her place to breathe. I watched her. Not like a man greeting his partner after time apart. More like a man watching a performance he's already seen the script for. She kissed me. Asked about the dog. Said her sister was doing great. Showed me a picture of a charcuterie board on her phone, cheese, figs, a glass of wine beside a cozy fireplace. All fake. I knew she hadn't been in Colorado the entire time. That hotel receipt said Boston. 3 nights with Matthew Carr. A room with a king bed and a minibar charge she'd later brush off as room service. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I told her work had been fine. That I'd finally cleaned out the garage. That the neighbor's kid broke our mailbox again. She nodded along, none the wiser. She made pasta that night, played one of her playlists, Norah Jones, some soft acoustic stuff. The kind of music you listen to when you think life is exactly where it should be. I couldn't eat much. I kept wondering what her voice sounded like when she spoke to him. If she was softer. If she laughed more. If she let him see parts of her I hadn't seen in years. That night, she curled up beside me in bed. Slid her leg over mine like she always did. Called me, babe. Fell asleep with her head on my chest. And I just laid there. Eyes open. Staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above us like time didn't care what I knew. The next day, I started asking questions. Nothing direct, just little tests. I asked how her sister's husband was doing. She fumbled for his name, Brian, yeah. He's good. His name's Mike. I asked what airport she flew into. She said Denver. I nodded. Denver's a safe answer. But she told me she flew out of Logan on the way back. Forgot that detail. I didn't confront her. I just watched. Because I needed to see how good she was at this. How easy it came to her. And it did come easy. She lied like it was a second skin. Seamless. Casual. And I realized something then, this wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't even a midlife crisis. This was practice. She'd been doing this for years. Perfecting it. Hiding in plain sight while I cooked dinner, mowed the lawn, checked the mail. I started writing things down. Not because I needed a record, but because I needed clarity. When the mind's full of noise, the truth hides. So I wrote. Everything. Thursday, she said she stayed at Claire's. Claire posted a picture from Chicago. Friday, said she had a migraine. Took a call outside and smiled the whole time. Sunday, talked about our 10-year anniversary plans. Kept saying, we deserve something simple. Translation, guilt. By Monday, I was done collecting. I printed the emails. The hotel receipt. The photo on the bench. One of the letters that ended with, I can't keep pretending I'm someone else's. I set them all on the kitchen table. She came home from work late that day. Said traffic was awful. That her boss was on her again. That we should order Thai. Her voice was tired, familiar, soft. The voice of a partner. A liar. Then she saw the table. She didn't speak. Didn't move. Just stared. And I stared back. Finally, I said it. Calm. Simple. Who is Matthew, Julia? She didn't lie. Didn't pretend. Didn't even deny it. She sat down slowly. Hands trembling. Eyes darting. And then she said something I didn't expect. I didn't mean to hurt you. But I don't think I ever really stopped loving him. The worst part? She said it like it was supposed to make me understand. Like telling me she had a heart divided was more noble than telling me nothing at all. That night, I didn't yell. Didn't cry. I just listened. And by the end of it, I realized something. She didn't come back to confess. She came back hoping I'd never ask. Some endings don't scream. They don't burn the house down or shatter every dish in the sink. Some endings just quietly change the locks while the world goes on outside. The morning after the confrontation was eerily normal. Julia made coffee. Fed the dog. Opened the fridge like we hadn't spent the night before, tearing through a decade of shared history, thread by thread. She didn't bring up the letters. The receipts. The photo. She didn't bring up him. And I didn't force her. I think we both knew whatever needed to be said had already been said, just in a language neither of us wanted to translate anymore. That day, I went to work like usual. Fixed a busted server. Ate a sandwich alone at my desk. Nodded when coworkers made small talk. The world hadn't stopped turning just because mine had tilted on its axis. But in the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and keyboard clicks, I made a decision. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg her to stay or punish her for breaking something sacred. I wasn't going to wait for some apology wrapped in guilt and too little, too late. I was going to leave. But I was going to do it right. That night, I came home and said I needed some space. Told her I was going to stay at Derek's for a bit, my oldest friend, a guy who once helped me repaint our guest room in a single afternoon and never asked why Julia didn't help. She looked surprised. Maybe even relieved. She didn't protest. Didn't cry. Didn't follow me to the car. That was the moment I knew. Really knew. She'd already let me go a long time ago. I was just finally catching up. Over the next few days, I started unraveling our life gently. I removed my name from joint accounts. Called the utilities. Had the mail forwarded. I packed slowly, methodically, box by box, my books, my records, the framed photo of my dad that always sat by the door. I left most of the furniture. Let her keep the plates, the couch, the TV. I didn't want reminders. I wanted space. She tried once to talk. It was a Wednesday. She asked if we could sit down, really talk this time. I let her speak. She talked about how things had started with Matthew years ago, before we were serious, and how it had flared up again when she saw him at a conference. How it wasn't supposed to mean anything. How she thought she could keep that world in a box, locked away, without it infecting ours. Then she said the thing people always say when they're trying to soften the blow. I did love you, Adam. I still do, in some way. I nodded. But I didn't return the sentiment. Because by then, I'd realized something painful and freeing. She loved the version of me that didn't know better. The man who made playlists and bought plain snacks and stayed up late editing her grant proposals. She loved that man because he didn't ask for more. Because he didn't see her truth. But once you see someone clearly, you can't unsee them. And I saw Julia now. Not as a villain. Not even as a monster. But as someone who made a choice, again and again, to protect her secrets at the expense of our life. That's not love. That's cowardice dressed in warmth. So I left. Moved into a small place across town. Nothing fancy. Just mine. A second-hand couch, a mattress on the floor, and space to breathe. I didn't block her number. Didn't delete the photos. I just let her drift, the same way she'd let me drift for years, without resistance. Sometimes, at night, I replay the moments that should have felt off but didn't. The long showers. The late-night phone meetings. The trips where she came home quieter than she left. And I remind myself. It's not weakness to believe in someone. But it is strength to stop when the belief becomes a burden. I haven't heard from her in weeks now. Maybe she's with him. Maybe she's alone. Either way, I'm no longer her secret casualty. And I never will be again. You don't really move on from something like that. You move through it. And somewhere along the way, the ache dulls, the silence grows kind, and you wake up realizing, maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's the start. The apartment was small. 2 rooms, slanted ceilings, and a heater that clicked when it kicked on. But it was mine. And after 10 years of shared closets, shared calendars, and shared lies, I needed something to call just mine. The first few mornings were hard. I'd wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there, rolling toward the space where Julia used to sleep. Muscle memory is cruel like that. But the absence stopped feeling sharp after a while. Just quiet. I started building new routines. Grocery lists with things I actually liked. Late night runs when the streets were calm. Music loud while I made breakfast. There's something healing in hearing your own voice echo through a space no one else is shaping. I also started writing again. Not the work stuff. Just thoughts. Feelings. Truths I didn't have room for before. I wrote about betrayal. About grief. But also about growth. About how losing someone isn't always a loss, sometimes it's a return. A return to yourself. I never posted them. Never shared. Just saved them in a folder named After. It took a while before people stopped asking how I was. Friends meant well, but there's only so many times you can say, I'm okay, without it becoming muscle memory too. Derek was a constant. He showed up with pizza on nights I didn't ask. He helped me carry furniture from Facebook Marketplace that smelled like incense and someone else's past life. He didn't ask for details. Just said, man, you're doing better than you think. And honestly, I was. Not right away. But slowly. It's strange. You spend a decade imagining forever, and then you find freedom in a Tuesday evening with nobody to answer to. Julia reached out once. A text. Just one line. I'm sorry. I really hope you're okay. I read it. Let it sit there on the screen. Then deleted it. Not because I was angry anymore. But because there was nothing left to say. She had her chapter. And I was writing mine now. One weekend, I drove to the coast. Brought a notebook, a thermos of coffee, and no plan. Just sat near the water, letting the wind do what it does, clear out the noise. I looked around at families, couples, kids chasing gulls. And for the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider in life. I felt like a man with space in his chest again. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just is. Sometimes I still think about the version of me that didn't know. The man who trusted with both hands open. The one who made playlists and booked anniversary trips and believed love was enough to hold 2 people together. I don't hate that man. I thank him. Because he got me here. To this tiny apartment, this new life, this stronger self. He carried the weight until I could set it down. And now I live lighter. I laugh more. I look people in the eye. I sleep through the night. And every now and then, when I catch my reflection brushing my teeth or walking past a store window, I think. That's him. That's me. The man who survived it. Who didn't just lose something. He found himself. And I smile. Because the life I built before. It taught me everything I needed to start the one I've built now. And this time, there are no drafts. Just truth. And room to grow.